Hello. So Bill and I are going to talk about a great project called Melody. It's open source to build a platform for federated learning, which is used in the context of the project to accelerate drug discovery. So Bill, if you want to present yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Bill Mulligan, and I work at Kubermatic, which is a company that works on multi-cluster management for automation of IT operations in the cloud-native technology space.
And I'm Camille Marini. I work at Owkin. It's a startup founded 3 years ago. We do machine learning to help medical research. In the Melody project, we are project coordinator, and we also develop the application layer of the platform of federated learning, which we are going to present today. As a start, what is Melody? Melody is a project which is funded by the European Commission and the European Federation of pharmaceutical industries and associations. So it's an IMI project for those who are familiar with these types of projects. The goal of the project is to apply federated learning for drug discovery with data from 10 pharmaceutical companies. So you can see the logo of these pharmaceutical companies on the slide. They are responsible for preparing the data and also providing the data. In the consortium, there are also what we call public partners because they are publicly funded. And they are responsible for building and also for operating the platform of federated learning. In particular, there is Lodze, now called Kubermatic, which takes care of setting up the infra, and Owkin, which takes care of the application layer. And for this, we use open source solutions. So Kubermatic uses Kubermatic, and at Owkin, we use Okin Connect, which is based on an open source framework Substrat. It's a project which started 1 year ago, and it's going to last 2 more years. So why do we want to build such a platform of federated learning for drug discovery? As a disclaimer, I'm not a chemist, but I'll try to explain. On average, bringing one drug to market costs a bit less than 2 billion euros and takes 13 years. So it's a lot. And one of the steps corresponds to drug discovery. Typically, a pharmaceutical company would do a lot of assays, checking whether specific molecules interact with specific targets, proteins. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So every pharma has a library of annotated molecules, so of these data sets. And this library is very precious for pharma. They have patents on many molecules, so for them it's a key asset, a key competitive asset. And in the recent years, machine learning has been proven very efficient to accelerate the drug discovery part, doing a screening process, an automated screening process. In Melody, we want to show the benefits of building a machine learning models using data from the set of the different pharmaceutical companies. So this is really the goal of the project. So, but in order to do this, we need to build a platform. And this platform is based on one hand Kubermatic and on the other hand Okin Connect. So I'm going to start with presenting Okin Connect. So it corresponds to the application layer of the platform, and it makes it possible to do federated learning. But what is federated learning? So As just mentioned, each pharma has its own library of annotated molecules. And we want to train a machine learning model with the ensemble of datasets, with the dataset of the different pharmaceutical companies. So to train a model on multiple data sources, the standard approach would be to pull all the data in one center and train a machine learning model there. But in the context of Melody, it's absolutely not possible. Because, as I just mentioned, it's very competitive data. I mean, it's very sensitive data because it's competitive data. So pharma companies don't want to share to share their data with competitors. So it's not possible to do this pooling of data. And another approach is to let the data remain, to let the data stored in pharmaceutical centers and make the machine learning model travel from one center to another in order to be trained. And this is what we call federated learning. More precisely, in order to train a model with this scheme, we would train the model, train different models in parallel on the data of each pharma center. Then we would aggregate the output model in what is called the model dispatcher. So it's a specific application. And then this aggregated model is sent back to the different pharma centers. The training continues. Then it's aggregated again, and so on and so forth. So this is what's called federated learning. And to do so, at Owkin, we've built a solution which is called Owkin Connect. It's built around two key features. So the first one is data privacy. We deal with very sensitive data, so we want to make sure that no properties of the data can go out of the pharma center. And the second feature is traceability, because we believe that traceability brings trust between partners that don't trust themselves, each other. And also because traceability makes it possible to reproduce results. So it's something that is key in our context. And Owkin Connect is built with an open core approach. So we use the open source framework, which is called Substrat, which was also developed at Owkin. And on top of this open core, we develop proprietary layers, such as techniques to protect machine learning models, but also some tools to deploy the application more easily. The open core Substrat makes it possible to set up a network of nodes. So it's not Kubernetes nodes, but it's an application. And it makes it possible to do the orchestration of the training on data which are distributed. On top of these open cores, we have charts to deploy the Melody platform because everything runs on Kubernetes, and some tools such as the secure aggregation, which is a specific technique to make sure that models cannot leak data properties outside of the pharma company servers. So this is the overview of the application layer once it is deployed. So basically, there is an application deployed on a Kubernetes cluster in every pharma, and also an application which is deployed and called the model dispatcher. In each pharma, we store data, and the data are going to be remain there. They're not going to go outside of the application. And we train a machine learning model on this data by exchanging the model updates with the model dispatcher and doing the orchestration of the training. It's made possible through two networks. So the first networks correspond to the what is represented in blue. It corresponds to exchanges of model updates, which is done through a classic REST API. And the second network corresponds to what is called the non-sensitive metadata network, corresponding to the exchanges of non-sensitive metadata used to orchestrate the training of the model. And for this, we use a distributed ledger technology, which is open source and which is Hyperledger Fabric. So using the application, we can submit what is called compute plans. So it corresponds to a set of training, aggregation, and evaluation tasks. So the training task occurs on a pharma application, and the aggregation task corresponds to aggregating model updates, so the output of a training step, which is done on the model dispatcher. And it's up to the data scientist to define how to train the model, so which algorithm is used and which aggregation to use. So the Owkin Connect is agnostic to this type of algorithm. So it's up to the data scientist, and in the Melody project is done by a partner, which is KU Leuven. So before letting Bill present Kubermatic, this is an overview of the architecture of Connect. So it's just an overview. Basically, in every pharma center, so it's called node here, but it's not a Kubernetes node, we deploy a backend called Substra backend, which is responsible for managing training tasks and also for managing the storage of data. And this backend interacts with a non-sensitive metadata network enabled through Hyperledger Fabric in order to exchange non-sensitive metadata about the machine learning model and the set of the status of the compute plan through this metadata network. And then there are some tools to interact with the platform, such as a SDK, a Python SDK, and a command line application. So everything is deployed on Kubernetes using the solution of which is going to be presented by Bill. I'm going to switch.
Cool. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah. So what I'm going to talk about now is how we use the Kubernetes platform to deploy and manage the Kubernetes clusters that are supporting all of the federated learning, both the aggregation point from Owkin and the actual models themselves, while still keeping each of the data from each of the pharma partners secure and private in their own accounts. And so the way that we actually do that is actually by running Kubernetes in Kubernetes. And so the advantage that this allows us to do is to actually be able to deploy and manage clusters from a centralized location without actually having access to any of the accounts. Because what each one of the pharma partners really cares about is really the privacy around their data, because that's their most secure and valuable intellectual property. So they need a way to ensure that they have complete control over that data. So the model is to first deploy a Kubernetes cluster using Kube1, which is our open source tool for Kubernetes cluster lifecycle management for a single cluster. And so what this allows us to do is to create a single highly available Kubernetes cluster running in an AWS account controlled by us. And what we're going to do in that account is then go in and deploy both Kubermatic Kubernetes platform, which will provision all the clusters and all of the centralized services. So like the GitLab instance that we're using, the aggregation layer, to be able to manage the data in the model across all the pharma accounts. And so what Kubernetes platform is really just a set of Kubernetes operators that help us actually provision and control the cluster state in an automated fashion. And it's built in similar to upstream Kubernetes, where it has like an API, controller, a UI, and all the concepts from it are able to be managed by just kubectl itself. And so what we're actually going to do is from this centralized service cluster and service account, be able to provision Kubernetes clusters into each of the pharma partners' AWS accounts. So keeping all the accounts and all of the data separate while still providing an ability to centrally coordinate the training of the model. And so what we can do with Kubermatic is spin up multiple like Kubernetes clusters. One is for like our central cluster services that is running like the aggregation service and like the GitLab instances. And the other part is to actually create clusters in the pharma partners so that they can actually run the machine learning models. And so what this allows us to do is to have a simplified way to manage the Kubernetes cluster lifecycle across all these different accounts. And the great thing about being able to leverage Kubernetes is really the whole promise of like the cloud native ecosystem, that we have one consistent way to run and manage applications running on infrastructure anywhere. So actually, when we began this project, we were actually thinking we were going to do a hybrid approach of running some of the stuff in the cloud and some of the stuff on premise. And that's how we really came to the idea that we needed to use Kubernetes to begin with, because what Kubernetes really gives us is one consistent way, a clear API and clear contracts to run applications wherever we want them to go, whether that would be in the cloud or on premise. And we have ended up just like running all of our stuff in the cloud, but it's still using Kubernetes still gives us the ability to run workloads consistently in the same way across all these different accounts. So rather than having to worry about inconsistencies, we have a clear abstraction layer to be able to run our workloads and deliver on this. And so if we kind of look at this project as a whole, so some of the benefits of using open source in both Kubernetes platform, Owkin, and Kubernetes as a whole, is that we can do that the code is available and it can be freely shared and freely audited by all of our partners. Since all of the pharma partners are very concerned about their IP, the ability to review the source code and be able to audit it is very important to them because they don't want to run untrusted software on their actual systems. The second part is the abstraction of open source software is that really anybody can use it and run it wherever they want to. So it really creates a consistent way for us to create and deploy both infrastructure and the software across all of the companies. It's not something that's proprietary to one company, but it can be used in a consistent way across all of our partners. The next part is we can run the same software without having to run on the same infrastructure. So if we wanted to, in the future, some of the models that we're looking at is being able to run in private data centers or be able to run in different cloud providers. And the great thing about using like open source is that we can use it wherever we want. So we can actually use the same model, the same software again, without having to run it on the exact same infrastructure. So we're not tied into like a single vendor. And we're able to protect from malicious actors because of the ability to audit open source. Camille, is there anything you'd like to add to the list or the benefits of using the open source community?
Yes, another point is that having our code open source makes it possible to benefit from the contribution of the open source committee, and it's something that is very valuable for the project.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If you just look at the growth and the power of the Kubernetes projects, it's really powered by the community. So be able to leverage open source software allows us to leverage that community too. And so the cool thing about this project is because it's not tied to a specific industry, is that we're actually looking to leverage this project in other industries. So other industries that have the problem of machine learning would help them solve some of their problems if they could collaborate on their data to improve the performance, but that the data is actually still their competitive advantage. So some of the examples of insurance, like can we create better risk models, logistics of how do we efficiently route stuff around the world, or finance, how do we predict risk in markets? And if we can be able to effectively help people to competitively collaborate through the power of open source software like Kubernetes, Kubermatic Kubernetes platform, and Owkin Connect, we really have the ability to change what is possible in the industry. So if you'd like to contact other people in the consortium, so both of our contact info is on here. Please feel free to reach out. If you want to contact the project directly for interest, please contact the project coordinators, either on the public side with Matthew at Owkin, or the pharma lead, which is Hugo who's at Janssen. And with that, we'd really like to say thank you to all of our partners around the world. I think, Camille, how many people are actually involved in the project? I think it's over 100 at this point. So it's not just one person who's making this happen. It's really like the power of the community that's making this project happen. And I'm really excited to see like the results of our first yearly run and really see how this can help transform the process of drug discovery.
Hello. So the first question was, what is trustless traceability? So I'm gonna go back to the slide. So trustless traceability is a traceability without the need to rely on one organization only, meaning that so I think it was in this slide, it's mentioned here. So, and as you can see on this slide, there is no organization, no account on the platform which is responsible for administrating all the nodes and for storing a database with all the operations that are going to occur on the platform. More specifically, in the project, we use a distributed ledger technology. And for this, we use Hyperledger Fabric, which is an open source framework of a distributed ledger technology. And using this technology, we don't need to rely on one organization being responsible for the traceability.
Great. And maybe I can jump in for the next question that we have here, which is, so does each pharma partner use its own compute power, or do they share compute infrastructure? So each pharma partner is actually running their own machines. They're in completely separated AWS accounts. So the only sharing is of the model between each pharma partner. So the actual compute power is individual to each pharma, because obviously you want to keep the machines where the code is actually running and where the data is actually stored separate from each other. So each one is individual. And then it looks like the next question is, have you applied this model to health data, so things like patient data for cancer research? Camille, maybe you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I don't know whether the question is about machine learning model or about the platform in itself. If the question was about the machine learning model that is created using this platform, we don't really know what it is used for. I mean, we just know that it is used for drug discovery, but then we don't know more about what pharma partners do with it. But then if the question was about the platform, I mean, whether we apply the platform, we use the platform for user use cases, yes, we do. And especially we deploy the platform in hospitals and in order to work with patient data and like for cancer research. And yeah, please.
Go ahead.
Bill, go on. Okay, so the next one was, I think, a related question. Any public academic research use case using this model? So if by model, Michael, you meant the platform, yes, it is used. I mean, it is used by hospitals and research centers in France. But if you are talking about the machine learning model, so it's something that belongs to pharmaceutical companies, and so there is no access for public or academic partners.
And then the next one, can you provide examples of, I think it's sensitive and unsensitive data, which things like pharma industries share and which ones they rather would not? So in this specific context of this project, what they're looking at and trying to keep private is they have kind of like whole like libraries of like the activity of certain molecules. So they're going to run whole, because they have libraries of different molecules and they want to know how they react to different antigens within your body. And so they can look at the specific molecules and kind of like their activity profile. And so that's kind of like the sensitive data that they're trying to keep separate, is like how important or how good is that molecule for attaching to certain targets. Because right, if it's really good at attaching to a certain target, then it's a good candidate for a drug. If it's a good candidate for a drug, then you want to patent it, and you don't want other people to know about that until you have the patent and you can make money off of it. So things about sensitive data is usually things that can be turned into, in the case of pharma, is like some type of drug or drug target.
Maybe
next one is, how do you prevent a pharma company from being a bad actor and providing falsely labeled data? Maybe you want to take this, because that's kind of what Owkin does.
Yeah, so it's a difficult question, and I mean, it's a really difficult question, and it's a key aspect of the project. And in order to make sure that pharma companies do not provide bad data, what we do is that we evaluate the machine learning models on a test data set, and we do this kind of regularly. And in order to check whether the performance of the model is not the same in all the different partners, and more precisely, I mean, we also build a machine learning model which is not built in with a federated learning approach, just being run with data of the different partners. Using the distributed ledger technology, we are sure that it's the same data, and by comparing the performances of the multi-partner model, the federated learning model, and the single partner model, we are able kind of infer whether they have input bad data or not. But it's it's a key aspect and a difficult point. Then there was a question about are the algorithms the same across pharma organizations? Yes, they are the same. So it's the same algorithms, but models which are created then are not the same because they are created not exactly with the same data. So the next question, I think it's for you, Bill.
Yeah, so Kubernetes and Kubernetes CRDs leverage any of the existing open source libraries and frameworks. So I think this is relating to Kubermatic Kubernetes platform and how the actual platform works. And so what it is using is Kubernetes operators. And actually all the code is open source on GitHub. So if you look up Kubermatic on GitHub, you can find actually all the code there for both Kube1 and for Kubermatic. So it is all open source and you can find it. And if you have any questions or need like links to it, please feel free to reach out to me on the CNCF Slack. I'm always happy to answer questions.
Okay, and next question is: do different companies use different model or same model with different parameters? So we call a machine learning model the output of the training of an algorithm on data, and so we use the same hyperparameters for the different models, but we combine a model that is shared between the different partners, and so having the same parameters that are trained during the federated learning optimization. And then there is another part which is really private, and this one has different parameters for the different pharmaceutical companies.
Will the slides be available? If so, where? I can find them in the session agenda. So I think I did upload them to the session before the talk, but if they're not there, I'll make sure that they are after this talk. Or if there's problems getting them, please feel free to message me too. But they should already actually be on the KubeCon platform. Are there more questions that we have? Go back to page 1. I think we've answered all the questions in the chat so far. Also, we'll be hanging out in the KubeCon in the CNCF Slack in the case studies Slack channel for a little bit after this talk. Otherwise, feel free to message either of us on the CNCF Slack. I'm also available on Twitter. Also, my email is just bill@kubermatic.com. So I'm always happy to chat if you have questions about the project. I don't know, Camille, do you have anything else to say?
Nothing to add. So maybe thank you for letting us present this project, and also many thanks to the different partners of the project. And I think that's it.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for joining today.